The cantina on Nexus Station stank of alien sweat and burning fuel cells. Neon lights flickered through thick smoke that hung in the air like fog. Pirates, traders, and wanderers from 50 different worlds filled the cramped space, their voices mixing into a chaos of languages that no translator could fully decode. In the back corner, where the lights barely reached, sat a creature that most patrons gave a wide berth. Velthar was a Krillian, standing nearly 8 feet tall, even when seated. His purple scales caught what little light filtered through the haze, each one bearing scars that told stories of violence across the galaxy. For massive arms rested on the table, while his 6 eyes slowly scanned the room with the practiced wariness of someone who had survived too many battles. The war had been over for 10 years, but Velter still wore his old hegemony uniform. The dark fabric was faded now, patches covering holes where plasma bolts had nearly found their mark. 3 different metal ribbons hung from his chest, though anyone who knew military decorations would notice they were all for surviving battles that his side had lost. Maya Chen stepped through the cantina's entrance. Her clean Earth standard, clothing marking her as an outsider immediately. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of bright eyes that suggested she still believed the galaxy was a place where truth mattered. Her recording device was small but expensive, the kind real journalists used when they wanted to capture every detail of a story. She had been tracking Velthair for 3 weeks across 4 different stations. His service record showed he had been present at every major engagement between humans and the hegemony forces. More importantly, he had survived them all, in a war where entire fleets had been wiped out in single battles. That kind of survival required either incredible luck or incredible skill. Maya approached his table slowly, noting how his 6 eyes tracked her movement without his head turning. She was 10 feet away. His mandibles clicked once. It was a warning sound that every species in the galaxy recognized as dangerous. "Commander Velthor," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the way conversations around them had suddenly gone quiet. "My name is Maya Chen. I work for Galactic News Network." The Krillian's laugh was like metal scraping against stone. "Journalist, I should have guessed from the smell of naive hope." He gestured to the empty chair across from him with one of his lower arms. "Sit if you must, but order something strong. The stories you want to hear require alcohol." Maya slid into the chair, immediately feeling dwarfed by the alien's massive presence. Up close, she could see that some of his scars were recent, while others had faded 2 thin silver lines across his purple hide. His uniform bore insignia she did not recognize, symbols of battles and campaigns that had been erased from official records. "I'm researching what really happened during the Human Hegemony War," she began, activating her recorder. "Your service files show you witnessed multiple human operations firsthand. The galaxy deserves to know the truth about how a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight managed to defeat an empire spanning 300 worlds." Velter's 6 eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "Truth." His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or anger. "Child, the truth is that your species should not exist. By every law of warfare, every principle of military strategy, every lesson learned across 10,000 years of galactic conflict, humans should have been extinct within 6 months of first contact." He reached for his glass, a massive crystal tumbler filled with something that glowed blue and smelled like burning circuits. "The hegemony had conquered species far more advanced than yours. We had weapons that could crack planets, ships that moved faster than anything in your fleet, soldiers bred for war across a dozen generations. We should have swept through your little corner of space like a solar wind through an asteroid field." Maya leaned forward, her recorder catching every word. "But you didn't. Why?" The veteran was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if he had changed his mind about talking. Around them, the cantina continued its chaotic business, but their corner felt isolated, cut off from the rest of the galaxy by the weight of memory. Finally, Velthor spoke, his voice so low she had to strain to hear him. "Because we made a fundamental error in our calculations. We assumed that humans would fight like every other species in the galaxy. We assumed you would follow the rules that had governed warfare since the first. Alien crawled out of their homeworld's mud and looked up at the stars. He drained his glass in one massive gulp, then looked directly at Maya with all 6 eyes. We never considered that you might not know the rules existed. Or worse, that you might know them and simply decide they did not apply to you, Maya felt. A chill run down her spine despite the cantina's stifling heat. What do you mean? Velthor signaled the bartender for another drink, then settled back in his chair like a predator preparing to tell the story of how he had been outmaneuvered by prey. Find someone else, human, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Some stories are better left buried in the void between stars. Maya reached into her jacket and pulled out a credit chip worth more than most beings in the cantina would see. In a year, she slid it across the scarred metal table, where it caught the light like a small star. The alien stared at the credits, then at her face, searching for something in her expression. After a moment that felt like an eternity, his shoulders sagged as if a great weight had settled on them. You want to know about human warfare? About how your species fights when their backs are against the wall and death is reaching for them with claws extended? He picked up his fresh drink, holding it like a weapon. Very well, journalist, but do not say I did not warn you. Witnessed out there in the dark between worlds changed how I see war itself. It's changed how I see what is possible when beings refuse to accept that they are beaten. His 6 eyes grew distant, looking through the cantina walls toward memories that haunted him across the years. Let me tell you about Lieutenant Park, Daehyun, and what happened at the siege of Proxima 7. Let me tell you about the day. Your species taught the galaxy that the only true limitation in warfare is imagination. The second drink hit Velthor. Harder than the first, Maya could see his massive frame relax slightly as the alcohol worked through his alien bloodstream. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit she had noticed whenever he was about to reveal something particularly painful. Proxima 7, he began, his voice taking on the distant quality of someone reliving a nightmare. Beautiful moon, if you like death traps, sits in the shadow of a red giant star, tidally locked so one side is always burning while the other freezes. The hegemony had been building fortifications there for 30 years. Maya adjusted her recorder, making sure it caught every detail. Around them, the cantina had grown quieter as other patrons sensed the gravity of the conversation taking place in the dark corner. Picture this, Velthor continued, using his forearms to sketch shapes in the air. The entire surface was covered in weapons platforms, energy shields that could stop a supernova. We had antimatter cannons that could punch holes through battle cruisers from orbit. 40,000 of the hegemony's finest warriors, armed with the best technology 3 centuries of conquest could provide. His mandibles clicked as he remembered. Our commander was General Krosdik, veteran of the Andromedon campaign. He had never lost a battle in 60 years of service. When the human ships appeared on our sensors, he actually laughed. 8 small cruisers and a handful of transport vessels. Maybe 800 Marines total. Maya could barely contain her excitement. What happened when they made contact? Standard protocol, Velthor replied, reaching for his glass again. Krosdik opened communications and offered terms of surrender. Generous ones, actually. Safe passage back to Earth, prisoner exchanges, the usual diplomatic nonsense. He expected immediate compliance. The Krillian's laugh was harsh, like grinding metal. Instead, this young human face appears on our main screen. Lieutenant Park Dehan, though we did not know his name then. Clean uniform, short black hair, eyes that seemed to calm for someone staring at certain death. Krastik began his standard surrender speech, listing our weapons and defenses, explaining why resistance was futile. Maya leaned closer, sensing the story was about to take an unexpected turn. The human listened politely to the entire presentation. When Krastik finished, there was silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then this kid, this lieutenant who looked like he should be studying for academy exams instead of leading a doomed assault, smiled, not a nervous smile or a defiant one. A genuinely pleased smile, like he had just received wonderful news. Velthar's 6 eyes focused on Maya with uncomfortable intensity. He said, "Thank you for the geography lesson, General. We appreciate the detailed information about your defensive capabilities. It will make our job much easier." Then he cut the transmission. The veteran shook his massive head. Krastik was furious. He ordered immediate strikes on the human ships. But they had already scattered into the asteroid field surrounding the moon. Our sensors lost them completely. We assumed they were regrouping. For a suicide attack? Maya could feel her pulse quickening. But that's not what happened, was it? For 3 days, absolutely nothing occurred. Our scouts found no trace of human activity. No ships, no landing parties, no communications. It was like they had vanished into space itself. Krastik began to think they had retreated. Velthar's expression grew darker. Then the earthquakes started. He paused to order another drink, his hands trembling slightly with either alcohol or memory. Small tremors at first. Barely registered on our seismic equipment, our engineers dismissed them as natural geological activity. Proxima 7 had always been tectonically unstable due to the gravitational stress from its primary star. But they got stronger, Maya prompted. Day by day, hour by hour. By the end of the first week, we were experiencing magnitude for tremors. Every few hours, our deep bunkers started showing stress fractures. Equipment began malfunctioning. Still, no sign of the humans. Velthar's voice dropped to a whisper. Then, Lieutenant Grixenol, one of our sensor specialists, made a discovery that changed everything. The alien veteran looked around the cantina as if checking for listeners, then leaned across the table. He had been tracking the tremor patterns, trying to predict when the next one would hit. The data made no sense at first. The earthquakes were not random. They followed a precise mathematical sequence, each one calculated to create maximum structural damage to our specific fortifications. Maya felt her mouth go dry. They were artificial. Worse than artificial. They were surgical. Those 800 humans had somehow mapped our entire underground complex from orbit, then spent 3 days placing microcharges at precise points throughout the moon's crust. Not enough explosive to destroy Proxima 7, but perfectly positioned to turn our fortress into a house of cards. Velthar's forearms moved in complex patterns as he described the unfolding disaster. By day 10, entire sections of our base were collapsing. Not from direct damage, but because the supporting rock structures had been systematically weakened. Our antimatter cannons were buried under tons of rubble. Shield generators disappeared into sinkholes that opened up exactly where they would do the most damage. But the most terrifying part, he continued, his voice barely audible above the cantina's background noise, was the precision. Every collapse was calculated to disable our defenses while leaving our life support systems intact. They were not trying to kill us. They were dismantling our ability to fight back piece by piece. Maya struggled to comprehend the scale of what she was hearing. How is that even possible? The engineering required to map an entire moon's geological structure and then manipulate it. That is exactly what Krastik kept asking, Velthar replied grimly. His staff ran continuous scans, trying to understand how such precise demolition was being accomplished. The answer came on day 12, when one of our patrol ships spotted something in the asteroid field. The veteran's 6 eyes closed briefly, as if he was steeling himself for what came next. It was not ships hiding in the asteroids. It was the asteroids themselves. The humans had hollowed out dozens of large rocks and filled them with drilling equipment, sensors, and computational systems. They had turned the entire asteroid field into a massive geological engineering project. While we were looking for enemy ships, they were using remote-controlled mining robots to bore into our moon from 100 different angles. Each drill was guided by real-time seismic analysis, allowing them to place their charges with surgical accuracy. We were being defeated by construction equipment operated from millions of miles away. Maya shook her head in amazement. But how did they know where to drill? How did they map your fortifications so precisely? Velthor's bitter laugh filled their corner of the cantina. Remember Krastik's surrender offer? His detailed presentation of our weapons and defenses? That young lieutenant had listened to every word, recorded every detail, and used our own intelligence against us. He turned our attempt at intimidation into a complete tactical briefing. The alien veteran drained his glass and stared at the empty bottom as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. By day 14, 60% of our defensive positions had collapsed into perfectly formed craters. Our troops were trapped in isolated pockets, unable to coordinate or support each other. The fortress that had taken 30 years to build was being systematically dismantled by enemies we never even saw. That is when Krastik finally contacted Lieutenant Dehayan again. This time, it was the general offering surrender. Velthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been admiration or terror. The human accepted graciously, even arranged for medical supplies to be delivered to our wounded. Professional courtesy between soldiers, he called it. Maya saved her, recording, and looked up at the massive alien across from her. What happened to Lieutenant Dehayan after the battle? Promoted to captain within a month. Last I heard, he was teaching strategic engineering at the Human Military Academy. Velthor signaled for another drink, though Maya noticed his hands. We're steadier now. That human taught me something that still keeps me awake at night. The battlefield is not just the space where armies meet. The battlefield is everything. The ground beneath your feet, the rocks floating in space, even the words your enemy speaks to you. He looked directly at Maya with all 6 eyes. Your species does not fight wars the way the rest of us do. You fight with the universe itself as your weapon. That young journalist is why the hegemony could never have one. We were playing a game with rules we understood. You were rewriting reality. The bartender, a 6-armed Zentarian with silver skin, brought Velthar his 4th drink of the evening. The alien veteran's massive hands wrapped around the glass like it was a lifeline, and Maya noticed his 6 eyes had taken on a distant, haunted quality that suggested this next story cut deeper than the first. The Crimson Nebula, Velthar began, his voice barely above a whisper. Even the name sounds like something from a nightmare. It's a stellar graveyard, filled with the remains of dead stars and the hulks of ships that got too close to its gravitational anomalies the hegemony chose. It as a staging ground because we thought the humans would never be foolish enough to follow us there. Maya adjusted her position in the uncomfortable chair, noticing that several other patrons had subtly moved closer to their table. Velthor's stories were drawing an audience, though no one dared to openly eavesdrop on the scarred veteran. Unit was the 47th Shock Regiment, he continued. Elite troops, supposedly. We had been fighting humans for 8 months and thought we understood their tactics. Hit hard, hit fast, use superior technology to overwhelm them before they could think of something clever. His mandibles clicked in bitter amusement. We were so wrong it would have been funny if people had not died because of our arrogance. Krillian took a long drink before continuing. The battle started like any other. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace right into our defensive perimeter. Our commander, Colonel Vector, was confident. We had them outnumbered 3-1, and we controlled the high ground on a cluster of asteroids that gave us perfect firing positions. Maya leaned forward, her recorder capturing every word. What went wrong? Everything and nothing, Velthor replied cryptically. The humans attacked exactly as we expected. Frontal assault? No clever tricks, just Marines in drop pods heading straight for our positions. We should have wiped them out in the first hour. Instead, we found ourselves in a grinding, bloody stalemate that lasted for 3 days. His 6 eyes focused on something beyond the cantina walls, seeing battles that existed only in memory. The humans had better individual fighters than we expected. Every Marine seemed to know exactly where to take cover, exactly when to advance, exactly how to make our superior numbers work against us. But that was not the worst part. What was? Maya asked, though she sensed she might not want to hear the answer. They were learning, Velthor said simply. Not just adapting to our tactics, but studying us. Every engagement, every skirmish, they got a little better at predicting what we would do next. It was like fighting an enemy who was reading our minds. The veteran's voice grew rougher as he delved deeper into the memory. By the second day, my squad was pinned down in what used to be the cargo bay of a destroyed freighter. Human artillery had found our range, and every time we tried to move, plasma rounds would rain down like molten death. Half my unit was wounded, including our medic, Theckener. Maya could see the pain in Velthor's expression as he remembered fallen comrades. Theckener was a good soldier, saved more lives than he took, which is rare in our line of work. Was bleeding out from shrapnel wounds, and none of us had the medical training to help him. We were watching our friend die, and there was nothing we could do about it. The alien veteran paused to gather himself, his forearms trembling slightly. That's when she appeared. Right in the middle of the crossfire, running like her life depended on it. Which it did, considering the amount of weapons fire she was. Dodging Sergeant Hansomin, Maya said, remembering the name from his earlier introduction. Such a small thing, Velthor continued, his voice filled with an emotion Maya could not quite identify. Maybe 50 kilograms soaking wet, dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Medical kit bouncing on her hip as she sprinted across open ground that should have been instant death for anyone fool enough to enter it. His 6 eyes closed briefly. As he relived the moment, she moved like water, flowing around obstacles. Diving behind cover, just as plasma bolts seared the air where she had been standing. Our sniper Grixtel had his rifle trained on her the entire time, but he could not get a clean shot. She was too fast, too unpredictable. Then she reached our position, and instead of taking cover or returning fire, she immediately started, examining our wounded, not her own people, us, the enemy. Slav was filled with bewilderment that had not faded even after 10 years. I thought she was insane. Maya found herself holding her breath as the story continued. Grixtel was hurt bad. Took a railgun round through the chest that should have killed him instantly. Our armor saved his life, but he was losing blood fast and having trouble breathing. Soman took one look at him and started working. No hesitation, no fear, just professional medical competence. The veteran's voice grew softer, but she was talking to him while she worked. Calm/soothing voice, asking about his family, his homeworld, his service record. Grixtel was in pain and scared, and talking seemed to help him stay focused. Before any of us realized what was happening, he was telling her everything. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Everything. Unit strength, ammunition status, defensive positions, extraction codes, command frequencies, everything. Velthor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation Maya had learned to recognize. But here's the thing that still haunts me. She was genuinely saving his life while she did it. The alien veteran stared into his drink as if it held answers. 2 questions he was afraid to ask. Soman used some kind of human medical technique I'd never seen before. Something about redirecting blood flow and using emergency stimulants to keep his organs functioning. Her own medics later said it was brilliant, innovative surgery that should not have worked but did. While she was operating, she called out, "To both sides of the battlefield, cease fire for medical evacuation," she said. Standard galactic protocols for wounded combatants. And somehow, impossibly, both sides agreed. Maya shook her head in amazement. That actually worked? It worked because she made it work, Velthor replied. Solman had this way of talking that made you believe her. When she said she was there to help wounded soldiers, you believed her. When she said the ceasefire was for humanitarian purposes, you believed that too. Even when you knew she was gathering intelligence, you still trusted her because she was actually saving lives. The veterans for arms moved in complex gestures as he described the scene. Human and hegemony medical teams worked together that day. Wounded from both sides, evacuated on the same transport ships. Enemies who had been trying to kill each other hours earlier were sharing medical supplies and comparing treatment techniques. By the time the ceasefire ended, our entire defensive strategy was compromised. Soman had talked to wounded soldiers from 6 different units, and each conversation had given her another piece of our tactical puzzle. She knew where our heavy weapons were positioned, which units were running low on ammunition, even which officers were making the tactical decisions. Velthar drained his glass and looked directly at Maya. But 37 soldiers on both sides were alive because of her. 37 beings who went home to their families instead of becoming casualties of war. How do you hate someone who saves your friend's life while simultaneously destroying your army? The cantina had grown noticeably quieter around them. Maya realized that half the establishment was now listening to Velthor's story. Species that normally avoided each other were sitting at neighboring tables, united by their fascination with this tale of human warfare. The battle ended 2 days later, the veteran continued. We lost, of course. The humans used Soman's intelligence to coordinate precise strikes against our weakest points. But it was not a massacre. They offered terms arranged for prisoner. Exchanges even sent medical supplies for our wounded. Six Eyes focused on Maya with uncomfortable intensity. That human medic taught me something that changed how I see warfare itself. Your species doesn't just fight with weapons or tactics or superior technology. You fight with compassion. You turn mercy into a weapon more powerful than any gun. Velthar's voice dropped barely above a whisper. And that is the most terrifying thing of all. Because how do you defend against an enemy who saves your life while defeating you? How do you hate someone who shows you kindness in the middle of hell? He stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across their table. Humans don't just win wars. You make your enemies grateful for losing, and that is a power that no military academy in the galaxy teaches how to counter. By now, the cantina had transformed into something resembling an impromptu theater. Beings from across the galaxy had quietly gathered around Velthor's table, forming a rough circle of chairs and makeshift seats. A Rodanian trader sat next to a vegan pirate, both equally captivated by the veteran's tales. Even the bartender had stopped serving drinks, leaning against the bar with all 6 arms crossed. Listening intently, Velthor seemed unaware of his growing audience, lost in memories that had haunted him for a decade. His massive purple frame swayed slightly as the alcohol worked through his system, but his voice remained steady and clear. The Void Nebula, he began, his 6 eyes reflecting, the cantina's dim lights like mirrors. If space has a hell, that is where you would find it. A cosmic graveyard, stretching across 3 light years, filled with the remains of ships from every major war in galactic history. The radiation levels alone should kill any living being within hours. Maya glanced around at their audience, then back at her recorder. She had stopped worrying about battery life hours ago. This story was worth whatever it cost to capture. The nebula forms naturally around dying stars, Velthar continued. But over the centuries it became something else. A place where fleets went to die. Battles that could not be won were fought there. Desperate last stands that ended in mutual destruction. By the time of our war with humanity, there were thousands of wrecked vessels floating in that poisonous cloud. The veterans for arms moved in complex patterns as he painted the scene. Admiral Kethmer was the finest tactical mind in the Hegemony fleet. He had studied human behavior for months, learning from our defeats at Proxima 7 and the Crimson Nebula. This time, he was determined to end the war with overwhelming force. A Zentarian merchant leaned forward from a nearby table. How many ships did the Hegemony have? Velthar glanced at the newcomer, then continued without missing a beat. 47. Capital ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. Over 200 smaller vessels. The largest fleet the Hegemony had assembled in 50 years. Against 15 human ships that had been running and fighting for 6 months straight, Maya could hear the bitter admiration in his voice. Captain Kim Jae-won commanded the human fleet from a battlecruiser called the Soul's Pride. Intelligence. Reports said he was young for his rank, maybe 35 standard years. A career officer who had worked his way up through the engineering corps before transferring to command. The alien veteran paused to take a drink, his eyes growing distant. Kethmer's strategy was perfect. He used the nebula's gravitational fields to trap the human fleet in a pocket of space with no escape routes. No hyperspace jumps, no sublight retreat, no way to call for reinforcements. It should have been a turkey shoot. What went wrong? Asked a Carillion smuggler from the back of the crowd. Nothing went wrong, Velthor replied with a harsh laugh. That was the problem. Everything went exactly according to plan. Gethmer opened communications and offered the standard terms of surrender. Professional courtesy between fleet commanders, he called it. The veteran's mandibles clicked as he remembered the moment. Captain J1 appeared on our main screen looking tired but not defeated. Clean uniform, steady voice, the kind of calm demeanor that comes from absolute confidence. Kethmer gave his standard speech about overwhelming odds and the futility of resistance. Maya found herself leaning forward despite having heard this introduction before, and J1's response. The human listened politely to the entire presentation. When Kethmer finished, there was maybe 10 seconds of silence. Then J1 smiled, that same unsettling expression we had seen from Lieutenant Dahian at Proxima 7. Velthores's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, said Admiral. We appreciate the offer, but we'll have to decline. We're not quite finished redecorating this neighborhood. A ripple of confused murmurs ran through the assembled crowd. The bartender called out, Redecorating? What did he mean? Velthores's 6 eyes swept across his audience before settling back on Maya. That is exactly what we wanted to know. For the next 6 hours, nothing happened. The human ships sat motionless in the nebula, apparently accepting their fate. Sensor operators reported minimal activity, just routine maintenance and what looked like repair work. But our long-range scanners were picking up something else, he continued. Movement throughout the nebula. Objects that should not have been able to move were changing position. Debris fields were shifting. Dead hulks were rotating in ways that violated basic physics. The veteran's voice grew more animated as he relived the confusion of that day. Kethmer ordered closer investigation. What our scouts found defied explanation. The humans were not just repairing their ships, they were stripping the wrecks. In the nebula, cannibalizing thousands of dead vessels for parts, weapons, and raw materials. Maya shook her head in amazement. But those ships had been dead for centuries. How could they possibly be salvaged? That is what we thought too, Velthor replied. But human engineers see possibilities where the rest of us see only scrap metal. They were not trying to make those old ships work again. They were turning them into something entirely new. A vegan pirate with cybernetic implants covering half his face leaned closer. Into what? Missiles, Velthor said simply. Guided missiles the size of dreadnoughts. They stripped out everything non-essential and packed the hulls with every explosive device they could manufacture. Then they installed remote piloting systems and basic maneuvering thrusters. The cantina fell silent as the implications sank in. The bartender's 6 arms hung motionless as he stared at the veteran. But that was just the opening act, Velthor continued. On the morning of the 3rd day, our sensors detected massive energy signatures throughout the nebula. Ships were powering up. Vessels that had been dead for longer than some species had been spacefaring. His voice took on an almost mystical quality. Then they came. Ships we recognized from history books. Vessels that had been destroyed in famous battles decades or centuries earlier. The Andromedan flagship that had died at the Battle of 7 Suns. Hegemony dreadnoughts that had been lost in the Outer Rim campaigns. Even some human ships that we had destroyed ourselves in earlier engagements. Maya felt her mouth go dry. That's impossible. Those ships were confirmed destroyed. That is what we thought, Velthor agreed. But there they were, limping out of the nebula's depths like ghosts returning from the dead. Weapons that should not have worked were firing. Crews that should have been corpses were manning battle stations. It was like fighting the galaxy's memory of every battle ever lost. The veteran's 6 eyes closed as he relived the terror of that moment. Our fleet scattered in panic. How do you fight an enemy that includes your own dead ships? How do you maintain discipline when your sensors are showing you impossibilities? It was all an illusion, he continued after a long pause. The most elaborate piece of theater ever staged in the history of warfare. While we were dealing with zombie fleets and ghost ships, J1's real vessels were using the nebula's magnetic fields to accelerate around our flanks, Traitor with 4 eyes and tentacles for arms gestured frantically. How did they create such convincing holograms? They did not need to, Velthor replied. The ghost ships were real. Dead hulks, yes, but real metal and ceramic. They had installed remote piloting systems and minimal power plants, just enough to move them around and operate basic weapons. Most of the crews were sophisticated AI programs broadcasting fake life signs. The alien veteran's laugh was filled with grudging respect. We were panicking about zombie dreadnoughts. The actual human ships were already in position to strike our command vessel. Our first indication that something was wrong came when the Soul's Pride emerged from the nebula directly above Admiral Kethmer's flagship. Maya could barely contain her excitement. What happened next? J1 opened communications one final time. Same calm voice, same confident smile, said, Admiral, thank you for maintaining formation while we completed our preparations. Your surrender is now accepted. Velthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been admiration. Oh, man. The ship was surrounded by human vessels that had materialized out of nowhere. While our main fleet was scattered across 3 sectors chasing ghosts, the veteran stood slowly, his massive frame towering over the assembled crowd. The battle was over before it really began. Kethmer surrendered to avoid unnecessary casualties, and the war effectively ended that day. J1 had turned our certain victory into total defeat using nothing but scrap metal, imagination, and a talent for misdirection that would have impressed the greatest magicians in galactic history. He looked around at the faces staring up at him, beings from dozens of species united in their fascination with human warfare. That human captain taught me the final lesson about your species. You do not just fight wars. You rewrite the fundamental rules of what warfare means. And once you have done that, victory becomes inevitable. The hours had passed like minutes in the smoky cantina, and Maya suddenly realized that the crowd of alien listeners had gradually melted away. The Rodanian traders had left first, muttering among themselves in their clicking language. The vegan pirates had followed, their cybernetic implants glowing as they recorded notes into their personal databases. Even the 6-armed bartender had retreated to the far end of the bar, cleaning glasses with mechanical precision while stealing glances at their table. Now, only Maya and Velthor remained, sitting across from each other like old friends sharing secrets in the dim light. The massive Krillian veteran looked older somehow, as if telling these stories had drained something vital from his purple-scaled form. His 6 eyes no longer held the sharp focus of a warrior, but the tired wisdom of someone who had seen too much and understood even more. Maya checked her recording device one final time, assuring that every word had been captured. The battery. Indicators showed less than 10% remaining, but it had been enough. These stories would change how the galaxy understood the human hegemony war, assuming anyone would believe them. You want to know the real truth about human warfare? Velthor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question seemed to hang in the air between them like smoke from the cantina's ventilation system. It is not your weapons or your tactics or your superior technology. Those things can be copied, improved upon, defeated. Maya leaned across the small table, sensing that the veteran was finally approaching the heart of what had haunted him for 10 years. Then what is it? It is how you think about problems that should not have solutions, he replied, his 4 massive arms gesturing slowly in the dim light. Every other species in the galaxy fights with what they have. Resources, weapons, ships, soldiers. We calculate odds, analyze strengths and weaknesses, make rational decisions based on available data. The alien veteran paused to finish the last drops of his drink, then continued. Humans fight with what could be. You look at the same situation. We do, but somehow you see possibilities that exist only in your imagination. Then you make those impossible things real through sheer stubborn determination. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the true scope of what Velthor was describing. You're talking about more than just military tactics. Exactly, he said, his mandibles clicking with what might have been approval. Dahin did not see an impregnable fortress at Proxima 7. He saw geology waiting to be reshaped, physics waiting to be turned into art. Solomon did not see enemies on that battlefield. She saw wounded beings who needed help, and an opportunity to gather intelligence while saving lives. The veteran's 6 eyes focused on Maya with uncomfortable intensity. J1 did not see a trap in the Void Nebula. He saw a stage for the greatest magic trick in military history, complete with props that had been waiting centuries for the right performer to use them. Velthor stood slowly, his battle-scarred form towering over their small table. Even in the cantina's low artificial gravity, he moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had been broken and rebuilt too many times to count. After the war ended, I spent years studying human military history. Every battle you had ever fought, from your ancient wars on Earth to your first encounters with alien species. Maya saved her recording and looked up at the massive alien. Suddenly aware of how small she appeared next to his imposing presence. "What did you find?" "A pattern," he replied simply. Every major human victory followed the same basic structure. Take an impossible situation and make it more impossible for your enemies. You do not just overcome obstacles, you transform them into weapons. The veteran began walking slowly around their table, his heavy footsteps echoing in the nearly empty cantina. "Your species has been doing this for thousands of years. At a place called Thermopylae, 300 warriors used terrain and tactics to hold off an army of hundreds of thousands. During something called World War II, the U-Island hopped across an entire ocean to defeat enemies who controlled vast continental empires." Maya found herself holding her breath as Velthor continued his analysis. "Even your first contact with alien species followed the same pattern? You were barely spacefaring, had primitive weapons, knew nothing about galactic politics? By every rational measure, you should have become subjects of whatever empire found you first. But that's not what happened," Maya said, beginning to understand where this was leading. "No, it is not," Velthor agreed. "Instead, you turned your ignorance into an advantage. You did not know the rules that governed interstellar relations, so you ignored them. You did not understand the established power structures, so you created your own. Within 50 years, humanity had become a major player in galactic politics." The alien veteran stopped pacing and placed one of his massive hands on Maya's shoulder. Despite his gentle touch, she could feel the incredible strength in those scaled fingers, strength that had been earned through decades of combat across the galaxy. "Do you hate us for winning?" Maya asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. Velthar's mandibles curved in what she had learned was his equivalent of a smile, though this one seemed sadder than the others she had seen. "Hate you, child? You misunderstand completely? I do not hate humans. I fear you." Maya felt her heart rate increase. "Fear us? Why?" "Not because of your weapons or your ships or your armies," he explained, his voice taking on an almost mystical quality. "Those things are temporary, changeable. I fear you because you have shown the galaxy that the only real limitation in any conflict is imagination itself." The veteran's 6 eyes seemed to look through Maya towards something beyond the cantina. Walls. For 10,000 years, warfare in this galaxy followed predictable patterns. Superior technology won, greater numbers won, better resources won. There were rules, established principles that every military academy taught. He paused, gathering his thoughts like a professor, preparing to deliver the most important lecture of his career. Then humans arrived and proved that all those rules were just suggestions. "You showed us that any problem can be solved if you are willing to think about it from enough different angles." Maya suddenly understood the true weight of what she was hearing. "You're not just talking about warfare anymore, are you?" "No, I am not," Velthar confirmed. "Your species does not just fight wars differently, Maya. You approach every challenge as if the established limitations do not apply to you, and somehow impossibly you make that attitude work." The massive alien moved toward the cantina's exit, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet space. But before reaching the door, he turned back one final time, his 6 eyes reflecting the dim lighting like stars in the darkness. "Tell your story, young journalist," he said, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "Broadcast it across every channel, translate it into every language. Let the galaxy know what I learned during that war." Maya stood up, suddenly feeling the importance of this moment. "What did you learn?" "That every species in this galaxy will now be asking themselves the same question that keeps me awake at night, Velthar replied. If humans can reimagine warfare itself and turn that reimagining into reality, what else might they decide to change? He gestured toward the cantina's windows, which showed the vast star field beyond Nexus Station. Trade. Diplomacy? The basic laws of physics? The nature of consciousness itself? There is no telling what impossible thing your species might decide to make possible next. The veteran's laugh was soft, but filled with something that might have been wonder. And that, Maya Chen, is why the galaxy will never be the same. You have taught us that imagination is not just a tool for creating art or entertainment. It is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of reshaping reality itself. Velthar walked through the cantina's exit and disappeared into the station's maze of corridors, leaving Maya alone with her recordings and the profound understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy that was still learning to fear. The power of imagination itself. She sat in the empty cantina for another hour, listening to the ambient sounds of the space station and thinking about the stories she had just heard. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of sharing these tales with the galaxy, knowing that they would change how every species understood both humanity and the nature of conflict itself. But tonight, she simply sat in the darkness and marveled at the realization that her species had been reshaping the universe without even knowing it. One impossible solution at a time, the end.